Hello and welcome to the newly renamed Zero and Wiz's Movie Club. That's right, it only took us one episode to rename this, so I'm actually quite proud of that. I am the Wiz.
I'm Zero.
Zero, how does it feel to have an official name?
Kind of nice.
It's nice, it feels official. We're all on the same page. It's great. Okay, so, last week, you decided through a whole maze of obfuscation that we are going to be, well, it was really my decision, but you kind of helped, that we are going to watch Wes Anderson's newest film, the 2021 movie, The French Dispatch. I'm very familiar with Wes Anderson. You're not so much, so I think I'd be really interested to hear what you think of The French Dispatch.
It was kind of a neat film, especially since it wasn't a just straight out film over the time duration. It was more like three short stories and then sort of a small epilogue at the end.
Mm. Right, and that's not a normal thing that Wes Anderson does. He usually does a straight narrative from beginning to end. So that when I realized that was the conceit of the movie, I was kind of surprised. It also surprised me by what the stance they were going towards when it came to the movie itself. I was very surprised that they were looking at everything from a journalist's point of view, which, if no one knows, of course, but I used to be a journalist, and I used to want to be a professional journalist, so this spoke to me in a different way when I was watching this. Yeah, and all three stories are good. All three stories are solid. I have my favorites. I have one that I'm about, and I have one that's a favorite of mine. But these are solid stories that are being shown in this movie. Wes Anderson has had a lot of success in writing movies. He's gotten nominated for Best Screenplay a couple of times on the Oscars. If I look back at his filmography, I think it's The Grand Budapest Hotel, and he also got nominated twice for Best Animated Feature. So he is a celebrated movie director when it comes to Hollywood. So he is popular among Hollywood, but he has a distinct style. I have to ask, what did you think of the style and the visual presentation of the movie?
It was really interesting because each story seemed to have sort of a different way of presenting itself, which I thought was kind of interesting. Especially the third story, because the third story you had animation being thrown into the mix, which was kind of an interesting design choice. I was just like, oh, I didn't expect to see any animation in this, and here we are.
Yes, and the way that in the movie they use color, and it's the movie. I wouldn't say it's mostly black and white, but it's muted colors they use a lot of in it. But when they use color, it actually kind of means something in the movie, which, especially I think in the first part, was really important to get some of the points across in the movie. What was your favorite story? I mean, there's three. The way the movie goes is that there's a journalist covering three different stories. The first one is about art, the second one is about politics, and the third one is about true crime. And it's done in a way that reminded me strongly of The New Yorker, which is a intellectual, long-form, journalistic kind of storytelling. I wonder which one was your favorite story, and when we get the spoilers, we'll go into detail as to why.
Actually, as odd as it is, I actually quite like the first one a lot.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
To prelude the whole piece about the three stories, the movie does introduce that there's a reason behind these three stories and everything, and we'll get to that in the spoiler
Hmm.
zone. But yeah, just it was just kind of neat just being presented with the premise that hey, these are about three stories from this Foreign Bureau publication and everything. And it was actually kind of funny that you mentioned the New Yorker, but that's there's a reason for that, at least from what I can tell. But I'll talk about that once we get into the spoiler zone area of this podcast.
I kind of, well, I kind of, after I watched the movie, because I was really feeling the New Yorker vibes in this. I was like, this really feels like the New Yorker to me. So I looked it up after the movie, and yeah, and this isn't a spoiler at all, but Wes Anderson has said that his direct inspiration to the movie was reading New Yorker and was emulating their style to a point. So it
Yeah, and even more so towards the end credits, because the end credits go through a bunch of covers of the French Dispatch,
mhm.
and all the covers are very much styled in like the vintage style of old New Yorker covers.
Yes, absolutely. Are you familiar with the New Yorker?
I am aware about it, and I've seen some of the covers every once in a while when they put out like an issue that's kind of poignant and on the nose to something within the current event space, but
Hmm.
not really super in tune with it.
Okay. I mean, I've read a few pieces like way back in the day, but they are intellectually dense and they're enjoyable. But I kind of felt like I had to have a thesaurus with me at times in order to read it because of how I guess the plain way of saying it, the type of words and sentence structure that they use. So that's why it kind of hit me when I was watching the movies. Like, this really feels like the New Yorker, but I don't think it's something that would alienate some people if they were to watch this and see, oh, this is really frou frou and very what's the word? I guess stodgy in a way. I guess is the best way I can come up with right now. Just I think for like someone, not that someone with a limited vocabulary, but not a robust vocabulary, I don't think they'd have a problem watching this movie and enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't really get too flowery in the vocabulary for the movie, so yeah, just um, I would probably agree that anyone with maybe um, a limited vocabulary can still enjoy the movie and everything.
Yeah. So okay, performance wise, I think Jeffrey Wright is the best performance of the movie. I think it's really going to depend on what you like and which story you like the most, but Jeffrey Wright, Leah Sado, and Benicio Del Toro are my three favorite performances. They are Jeffrey Wright is the journalist in the third story. Leah Sado is the female guard in the first story, and Benicio Del Toro is the artist in the first story.
Yeah, I was particularly drawn to Jeffrey Wright, mostly
Yes.
because just his narration, or the rather the voice that he has for narration is
Mm.
just so pleasant,
Ah.
and it was kind of funny because I was just like, oh my God, why does he sound so familiar? And then turns out that he also plays some parts that come up to recent mind. The biggest one being, uh, oh God, Felix Leiter from the more recent
Westworld.
James Bond
Oh
films.
yes. Oh yes. Of course. I forget that he's Felix in that.
Honestly, just it was just kind of neat to just hear his narration in the third story, because just he's just got such a pleasant voice about it, and it was just sort of neat seeing his the performances that he would kind of put in some of the parts of the story while he's narrating through and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, just overall, a lot of fun with the third story, especially with him being the narrator.
Right. And yeah, like you said, his voice is so good, and it fits the dialogue so well. with Anderson's dialogue so well that it really elevates the story that is being told in that section. And I've been a fan of Jeffrey Wright's for a long time. The first movie I remember watching him in was the remake of Shaft, the first remake. I don't know if you've seen the remake of Shaft with Samuel L. Jackson.
Have not.
Okay, he played the villain. He played a I think it was a drug dealer in the movie, and he of course he acted his ass off and he chewed scenery, but he was really good in it. And then he did an HBO film called God, what is it called? Oh, he did an HBO film that was really good. But he's also been in Westworld. He is a criminally underrated actor, and when he gets to get good roles and good dialogue, he's really good. And this movie really shows that he is an underutilized actor. I think now he is Jim Gordon in The Batman, I think, is his newest role.
Yep. Because I had started up The Batman last night, since I was like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to watch this, and I was just like, oh my god, it's Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah. Let's talk about okay. What were your favorite? Your favorite performance was Jeffrey Wright. You're saying?
Yeah, mostly because just the narration just kind of pulled together the true crime journalism story together so well.
One of my favorite actresses of all time is Frances McDormand, and I was sad to see that she was kind of underutilized in this. She was the reporter in the second story. I think the second story is the weakest of the three, but it's good. But I think they... how do I put this? There wasn't really a strong character behind the journalist in the second one. It was clearly a story about the revolutionaries and the student revolutionaries. But it felt like the journalist was just inserted incorrectly into the story itself. Whereas in the other two, either they're not in it at all, or they just so happen to be a part of it, and they're written well into it that it makes this piece more compelling. The second one felt off to me, so that's why I kind of went out of that one. It's good, but it's not as good as the other two.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree because for the first story, just the writer sort of comes off as sort of a silent observer, just someone who's just chronicling the events that transpired behind the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
And then whereas the third story, the writer was actively part of the events that happened, so it just felt like sort of seeing the story being retold from the writer's direct point of view and everything. And then the second one, yeah, it just didn't feel there, because just the reporter for that one kept trying to insist that they were trying to maintain journalistic neutrality, but
Yeah.
at the same time, just there were just events where she was sort of directly involved in it, and it sort of, I guess, knocked the storytelling off kilter a bit. I don't know. At least that's kind of how I felt about it.
It kind of seemed like it was a criticism of... I normally hate doing this because I when I analyze film, I kind of hate talking about it because I don't want it to make it seem like if you don't agree with me, you're watching it wrong. So please don't take it that way. You especially, Zero. But the way I took it was that the story was supposed to be a criticism of journalistic neutrality and how precarious and maybe how pointless it is when it comes to politics, which to me, which the concept itself I don't agree with. But I think that was the point of the story, that it's kind of pointless to be that way. but it didn't come off very well. It didn't come off right. So the message kind of got muddled in the story. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, and I can definitely see that as being a valid criticism as well too. Just it seemed like that they had an idea that they're going to go with, and then it's kind of like you mentioned, just they sort of dropped the ball on it.
Yeah. Um. Okay. I think the strongest one is the third part, and and the animation surprised me, but I kind of understand why it was done. Maybe for budgetary reasons, to but the way it was done was also kind of, it was kind of well done in a way. Because the minute I saw the animation, it was, oh, they kind of ran out of budget space, didn't they? And then I looked at it, I was like, no, this actually looks pretty good. So maybe not. Maybe this was a conscious artistic decision. So it just to accentuate maybe the ridiculousness of the situation. So I definitely enjoyed that. That could have hurt the story in a way because it was dealing in kind of a serious situation, but like a lot of Wes Anderson films, it takes serious situations and kind of makes it silly to a point. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was the third part was very well done in all of what it did. And I
Yeah.
know you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and to your point about the animation feeling kind of silly, but yet not feeling completely out of place, I'm definitely inclined to agree on that because just um, uh, for a second, when they start the animation, I'm just like, "Whoa, what in the world happened here?" And then it kind of goes back to the live action sequence, and I think it gets to one sequence where they go from live action to animation for a bit, and then the animation just perfectly loops back into the live action. And I
Yeah,
was just like, okay, that's actually kind of neat.
yeah, yeah. And and sorry, and Anderson has done animated films before. They're just stop motion animation, which kind of surprised me that this was hand drawn. So again, the third part was really good. Now let's talk about your favorite part, which is the first. Um, I thought it was interesting how they enveloped it in a seminar to a certain extent, as well as it being like the way that the first part is done. It's still an article, but the article is also being presented as an artistic seminar in front of a bunch of, I'm guessing, intellectuals and professors. So I think that was interesting. And Tilda Swinton, a great actress who is kind of crazy, but she's great as an actress. She plays the part really well, and her deadpan comedy is actually pretty good in this.
Yeah, the first one was sort of interesting, mostly because just um, it kind of reminded me of sort of an art appreciation lecture,
Mm-hmm.
because during my college days and everything, I had to take an elective credit, and the only thing I could think of that sort of fit my interest was art appreciation. And when it gets into the lecture pieces with Tilda Swinton's character, it just kind of reminded me of just being in a very engaging art appreciation lecture, and just um, what held my interest so much was just sort of uh, it was sort of the look into the artist
Mm-hmm.
aspect of the artwork that the story kind of went into. Just hey, this is the inspiration for the art piece. This is the why behind the art piece. This is why it's so significant. And then interlaced into that um, is a story of unrequited romance as well. But we can dive into that more during the
Right.
spoilers one section of this. But there's a unrequited love story which I thought was really interesting, um, and all that. And then uh, kind of to your point about the splashes of color happening, it was really interesting in the first story because a lot of the a lot of the recounting of the artist's life and everything is done in kind of muted, almost kind of black and whitish tones. And then when it jumps into sort of the modernish era where Tilda Swinton her character is doing the I guess it's a art symposium lecture. You've got just full brightish colors. They almost look kind of maybe 60s or 70s ish. So maybe that's when this lecture is happening. So it was just kind of a nice contrast. And then, of course, you have the splashes of colors during the important pivotal scenes, like the reveal of the artwork that happens towards the end of the story and everything. So the use of color was really neat for the first chapter and everything. So I think between all those things, that's what really just got my attention for the first story.
Okay. Okay. I like the first story. I like the performances. I love Leah Sado. She, even in her French, like even in any film she does, she's really good. I was surprised I liked Benicio Del Toro as much as I did. He's an actor that when he first got big in Traffic, that caught a lot of people's attention, but then kind of went downhill, or kind of I think maybe stayed quiet and didn't have more splashy roles. But he actually did this role really well. He's usually an intense kind of actor, but he maintained a certain muted intensity while still being. It's hard to describe Wes Anderson's type of filmmaking without it coming off as kind of an insult, but it's. Anderson's style is kind of stilted. And I really hate saying that because it comes off as insulting, but it's done in a deliberately paced way where it seems odd when you're watching it, but as you're watching it, it's comforting and and it really works for Anderson. So, but I was surprised that Del Toro worked so well under the framework of Anderson's style. So I was, again, pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, Del Toro's performance was really neat to see, especially since, um, in my mind, he kind of captured the I guess tranquil maniac sort of aesthetic that they were trying to give the artist character the feeling of, and it's kind of accentuated during the parole trial as well too.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's where the intensity part I think was ratcheted up a bit. Yeah, before we get into spoilers, okay, why don't we talk about Wes Anderson as a filmmaker? I know you're not. I'll go into it. I know you're not really. You don't know of a lot of his films, but a lot of his films are critically acclaimed. He has a big fan base of film lovers who adore his films. And I just have to ask you specifically, did this film make you curious as to his other films?
Yeah, certainly did. Mostly because just The French Dispatch is not a film that I would normally go out of my way for,
Right.
especially since just I like action films. I like sci-fi films, and I indulge rather a lot in animated films as well too. So this one being sort of more um, on the side of a storytelling comedy was a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but it was kind of nice to watch as well too because for me it was just like, hey, actually, this is kind of neat because while this isn't something that I would consider like my favorite movie or anything, I think it's still quite a great movie. Just even if it is something that is not within my normal choice of genre.
If you're into animated films, I would have to recommend Fantastic Mr. Fox. Let me check. Oh, it's on. Let me check if it's on Netflix, real quick. But Yeah, Fantastic Mr. Fox is actually a really good animated film. And if you haven't, it's on Disney Plus. Okay.
Okay.
So, in your leisure, if you want to see an animated film that's made by him, that's a good movie. My favorite of his is Rushmore, but I think a lot of people would say his best is either The Royal Tenenbaums or Moonrise Kingdom. So, if you want to get into probably his best work, that might be where to go. But like I said, for animated films, I haven't seen Isle of Dogs. I've heard that's good. But Fantastic Mr. Fox is actually a really well done movie. So are you ready to get into spoilers?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, we're going to get into spoilers for The French Dispatch. We'll give you 5 seconds, and then we'll have something on the YouTube post right there that'll say that we're going into spoiler territory in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. I'm surprised the framework wasn't as central of a storytelling device as I expected it to be. The only reason why is because Bill Murray is in almost every film that Anderson is in, and he's usually prominent in some sort of way. And the only time they use Murray in the movie was to start the movie off and then cap each story, which kind of surprised me in a bit. It's not a bad thing, but I was kind of surprised by it.
Yeah, and I thought the start of the movie that sort of laid out the premise was kind of neat too, especially since it starts off with the whole matter that this is a foreign division of a publication that is from Kansas.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was the only reason it came to be was the head of the publication. His son wanted to travel the world, so he sort of made an excuse, and then the father's just like, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and just make a branch office, and we'll just go from there.
Right.
And to introduce the story, they have sort of a introduction mini story where it talks about one of their reporters who sort of bikes around the fictional city of Ennui-sur-Oise, and showing just kind of how things have contrasted with past and present.
Yeah.
And how much or how little the city had changed over time, which I thought was sort of an interesting way to set up the setting.
Yeah.
The setting and place of where all these stories were going to revolve around.
It introduced the city as a character, but I didn't feel that the city was exactly important in the 3 stories. So, on one hand, I kind of appreciate its quirkiness, but on the other hand, I kind of forgot about it as the film went on. So,
Yeah.
because the stories didn't accentuate the city as much to turn it into its own character. It just was a setting, which was kind of disappointing. But
Yeah.
it doesn't exactly hurt the film.
Yeah. And then pretty much after this sort of mini introduction happens, it goes back to the publication itself, that the head editor of the French Dispatch, Arthur Howitzer, basically he dies of a heart attack, and in the stipulations of his will, he basically says that upon his death, that the magazine will be completely suspended and closed, but the writers will make one final farewell issue with 4 articles, along with an obituary and dedication to him, and that's sort of where this premise gets set up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the thing about the premise that I found disappointing is that it only connected itself in an arbitrary way. It was just to move the story along. It didn't have a how do I put this? It didn't have an overall meaning to the movie, except to say, this is how the structure is, this is how the story goes, this is the beginning, this is the end. That's it. There really is no other connection other than this. These are articles from a magazine, and that's kind of disappointing. But again, is it something that's is gonna lessen my enjoyment of the movie? No, it's not. But I just found that a little disappointing. We talked about before the spoilers. We talked about the first story, which is with Benicio Del Toro, Léa Seydoux, Adrian Brody, and a bunch of other actors. Those are the three main principal characters, character actors.
And, the first full story is titled "The Concrete Masterpiece."
Right, and I really enjoyed it. I kind of I don't know about you, Zero. You don't watch as much movies as I do, so maybe you don't have this problem. I'm getting kind of tired of nudity in movies just for nudity's sake. Like, for example, the first thing you see about Léa Seydoux in the movie is her completely naked body, doing an artistic pose. Now, if you want to give off the fact that she's nude, you can frame the scene to a certain point where you don't see her bits and bobs, and just be like, okay, yeah, I get it, she's a nude model. Okay, done. Cool. And then when it turns out that she's also the guard, then, then you can go elsewhere with it. But I was like, did that really need to... did you really need to have her nude again? I mean, we discussed it on our Discord. Blue is the warmest color, which Léa Seydoux was the main star of, and she's not naked throughout half the film, but there is an explicit sex scene in there that's pretty long, and it to me, the defense I always hear is it's central to the story and it's central to the artistic vision. But when is the artistic vision just a titillate? And at this point, and maybe this is my age now, because I'm nearing 40, I think by this point, I'm kind of done with just nudity for titillation's sake. So I hate to get hung up on this, but I was kind of like, is that really necessary? I mean, really? And nudity isn't something that Wes Anderson does most of the time either. If I look through his past films, I am fairly certain that the majority of his films doesn't have any nudity, so I'm not sure why this one needed it. So that's my feeling on that one. I'll move on from there.
Yeah. It almost seemed like it was the nudity was more to kind of try to set up that Simone, Léa Seydoux's character, was more to kind of set up that she was the muse, and then later in the Concrete Masterpiece, there's also talks that Simone also is able to maintain some just really, really just strenuous poses for a long while, and that they kind of show her modeling in some of the poses and everything. But even then, it was just kind of like after the first couple poses, yeah, we get it. She's the muse, and I kind of felt the same way. It's just like yeah, sure. The first time she's got nothing on. Okay, it's a bit of a shock because you're just like, whoa, holy shit, she's the prison guard overseeing this artist.
Yeah.
Wow, holy cow. But yeah, just when they go into, oh yeah, by the way, just on top of being his muse, she was also able to just take up some really, really just strenuous and tiresome poses without exhausting herself. It's just like, okay, well, we get it. Just just that's that.
Right.
But yeah, we really didn't need to see like 4 or 5 poses. I mean, you could have gotten away with at least maybe one, maybe two, maybe even three at most. But just I guess that they just really wanted to emphasize the whole piece that she was the muse.
Yeah. Um. Overall, with that story, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I think it's interesting how a lot of the scenes in the film are shot in a way of an artist's rendering. Like the final scene where the fight happened, it was done, or when they're showing all of his pieces in different locations, they're all done in a way that looks like an artist painting. I thought that was interesting. Visually, I think it's probably the best of the three, but story wise, I think the third one's best. But it's a solid entry. I liked it.
Yeah. Um, the still scenes where kind of like they almost have what feels like a photograph of like certain pivotal moments during that story.
Yeah,
I thought they were sort of interesting, and then um, on top of that, sometimes they would kind of use a panning camera shot that would sort of move into what seemed like the next photograph in this like chronicling of events. I thought that was just super neat of them to sort of use that technique to kind of emphasize these particular moments in that particular story that seemed very important.
yeah. So let's move on to the second story. I think is the weakest, and that is the political story involving Timothy Chalamet's character, who is I think that's a college student who also runs a political action group,
Yeah,
and a and the reporter played by Frances McDormand, who right off the bat starts a sexual relationship with him in, I think, probably the most awkward way possible. And this isn't awkward by like Anderson awkward, but like story wise and setting up the premise awkward. It felt kind of off to me, especially when she gets right afterwards involved to say, I have to maintain my journalistic integrity. And that's why I kind of felt, oh, they're making a jab at this. But it kind of
yeah,
doesn't work.
yeah. So for anyone following along and everything, the second story uh, is based on, I want to say, the the French Revolution of '68, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I forget offhand, but um, the title of the second story is "Revisions of a Manifesto." So just when I saw the little title card for the second story, I was just like, okay, interesting. This looks like this is going to be a much more political story,
Right.
and granted, politics is definitely not my forte, um, and politics in media can sort of be hit or miss with me. So it was kind of one of those things when I saw the title card, I was like, okay, just um, depending on how this lands, this may or may not be great for me.
Yeah. I mean, in all fairness, it's not an over, it's about politics. It's not about a politic. If you know what I'm saying, it's not about someone's politics or their thoughts and feelings about something. It's about politics in general. Like
Yeah,
but in order to really care about a subject you're talking about, you have to care about the characters to a certain extent, and I could kind of care less about any of them.
yeah.
I
I know the journalist Lucinda Kremens. Just I I really just didn't have much of an affinity for her because she just kind of came off as very cold and distant throughout the whole thing, and it almost kind of felt like the cold and distant personality she had was trying to play off on the whole principle that she tried to carry throughout the entire story, which was the whole journalistic neutrality thing.
Yeah, and her being cold really wasn't the issue. Really, my issue was just with the writing itself and how it was portrayed. Like I have said it again. I'll say it again. I think they clearly wanted to make a jab at political objective of journalistic integrity and objectivism when it comes to politics. I think I think Anderson clearly wanted to say something about it, and I don't think he got the message across quite well. And
Yeah.
the way you would do that in this one, I think, is to poke fun at the journalist, stating that she is uptight about her objectivism, but is getting so involved in the story that it's kind of hard for her to. It's kind of hard for her to do that, and for one of the main characters to point it out to her at the end, kind of defeats the message in a way. Because I would rather come out of it and going, a journalist isn't really that objective, is she? and highlight maybe the wrongness and the hypocrisy of the character itself, and come up with that myself, rather than the story tell me, because it seemed like the story just didn't know how to end and didn't know how to do it effectively enough. So it just kind of spelled it all out for you, and then close to that point ended it. And I think probably a cheap way. The story ends with the main character, the boy, dying, which I was like, okay, that does nothing. Sure. Okay then. I don't know what it did for you, but
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because the whole trying to poke fun at journalistic integrity bit sort of fell apart right in the middle of the story, after Kremens ends up kind of having a romantic dalliance with Zeffirelli, because just at one part he's just having trouble sort of putting together his little manifesto and everything, and she ends up sort of sorting it out for him, and she goes, "Yeah, I sorted it out for you. I basically figured out your writing style, so just this should do it. And by the way, I just also added an appendix because there's just so much flowery jargon that you use, and I figured that this would help some of the other people in your movement to be able to kind of understand some of your flowery language and everything." And right then and there, it's like, wow, just you built up this whole story of journalistic integrity, and it just falls apart right in the middle. It's just, oh, geez, this is coming off as one of the weaker stories in the movie so far. And then towards the end, just there's also the whole love triangle thing between Kremens, Zeffirelli, and Juliet.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I felt that was so forced. It just, to me, it was so obvious what they were going to, that I was just like, okay, I guess if that's where you want to go with it, go ahead. And at no point and when you can pretty much figure out within the first frame that this is what it was going to be, it kind of deflates the story. So, yeah.
Yeah. So overall, just the second story had some interesting potential, but it just sort of gives up the gas really early.
Yeah. Now, would you call it a bad story?
It's not bad. It's definitely weak.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think it's mercifully short. It felt short, at least. I think the first and the third one were much longer. But, yeah, it just felt like Anderson had an idea and it didn't really germinate the right way. So he just kind of said, "This is my idea. Here you go." And that's it. And kind of forgot to make good characters. And there you go. I think that's what happened. in this one. It's short. It's not bad. It's just not as good as the other two. That's okay. And then we'll go into the last one, which is I don't know I forget the characters' names, but Jeffrey Wright's character is basically doing a true crime story about a. Go ahead.
The title of the story being "The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner," and Jeffrey Wright's character is named Roebuck Wright, and and this is sort of a true crime story to recount attending a private dinner with the commissaire of the Ennui police force.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't this is funny. I didn't realize that all of this was set in Ennui.
Yeah, that's Ennui being the city that they sort of set up the premise in the first little mini story. But
I remember. I guess because it wasn't distinctive enough, it kind of didn't dawn on me until we were discussing it. Like, oh wait, interesting. But this is the strongest story of the three for me, and it may have to do with maybe I'm more interested in true crime than art, but the main journalistic character, just with Jeffrey Wright alone, I think trumps all three characters that were the main journalists in the story. So right there, you have a definite plus in Jeffrey Wright, and just Wright's delivery, not only in the framework scene where he's on a talk show with Liev Schreiber and talking about the story verbatim that he wrote years ago, but the way he acted as well, the way he fits so well in a Wes Anderson film. I want to see him again in a Wes Anderson film, is what I'm saying, because he is fantastic in the scene. Yeah. He owns the story. He owns this performance, which again can't praise enough. It's such a good performance.
Oh yeah, and just sort of the depiction of just a very, very confident confident reporter that has just kind of a tack sharp memory being on this TV show interview. Mm-hmm. I just thought he just sort of played that role with the bravado and confidence of like an ace reporter.
Yes, absolutely. Not only an ace reporter, but a fantastic writer, which they show in a scene where Bill Murray's character meets him in a jail. I think they kind of they show how much of a good reporter or a good writer he is, because he is willing to, I guess, front the money to get him out in order to get his services. So I thought that was interesting. The overall crime story is good. It's fun in a way, especially with how the details run in it. And then you mentioned the animated sequence in this section, which could have felt odd, but actually worked really well in the end of the story. So it's something that I don't want to spoil too much, because to me it's really the best part of the movie. But I really enjoyed this part after coming off of the second part where I was thinking, oh, this might fall apart, and it thankfully didn't, because the third one was so good.
Yeah, and just overall, just this one, like you mentioned, it's just a lot of fun, especially the police chase at the end, and that's where just the integration with the animation comes in, because just when it hits you, just on the initial viewing, it was just kind of a shock, because just, at least for me, I was watching the whole thing going, okay, well, this seems to have been a live action affair, probably just going to be a typical live action movie chase, because that's just how most live action movies are. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it just kind of clips over to an animation sequence, and much like your initial assessment where you're just like, oh dear, they probably ran out of money, here we go. And instead of just kind of low quality animation, it's very, very high quality and very fluid to boot.
Right.
Like,
It reminded me of not directly, because I know someone's going to hear this if you're like, huh? But it reminded me of The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, which is a 1930s animated film that was animated by animators who were printing on the cells of the actual film print. It looks gorgeous. It reminded me of that. It's not necessarily that style. It's not that style at all, but it kind of reminded me of that in a way. But yeah, the more I think about it, with Wes Anderson, it makes sense, because Wes Anderson, when he does action sequences, they come off corny in a purpose way, like on purpose, I should say. But if they did that in this scene, I don't think it would have worked very well. So I think this was the right move, and it worked out well. So yeah.
The performance by Stephen Park as Chef Nescapier,
Okay.
I thought that was real fun.
Yeah.
Especially just sort of the buildup of, yeah, he's this super masterful chef, but on top of being a masterful chef, just he's skilled more in haute cuisine, and on top of being just very skilled in haute cuisine, just he kind of makes the cuisine also palatable to the working police officer as well too. So it was just kind of this depiction of a super chef that can make both delicious food, but also food that's understandable to the average working man.
Yeah.
So that depiction was just kind of fun, especially just with all the fire and flair that they sort of add to the scenes where you see Chef Nescapier making food and everything. So that was a lot of fun, and it's kind of interesting too, because towards the end of this story, they sort of cut back to the French Dispatch's office, and the head editor basically says, you only gave Nescapier one line in your entire article.
Yeah.
And just he's supposed to be one of the more pivotal people in your story. Why? And then of course Roebuck's just like, well, I had something, but I decided to throw it away because I didn't really think it fit the story. So Houter just tells him, yeah, I still want to see it anyways.
Yeah.
And then it loops back into the story again, just with Nescapier just telling Wright that while he tasted the poison food and everything, the taste was so splendid, like something he had never ever had before in his life. But at the same time, sort of he commiserates with Roebuck, saying, the taste also kind of reminds him just how much just non-French foreigners sort of feel in France, that they just feel sort of disconnected, because just they aren't seen as just normal people in the citizenry, because they are foreign to France.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good scene.
This one kind of ties into the last story, the obituary scene. It's kind of interesting, just how this whole movie sort of culminated, especially when it gets to the obituary scene, and Hauser has just died, and he's just being examined by, I'm presuming, the medical examiner and everything. And so just the entire newsroom is sort of culminated together in the office, sort of trying to figure out, okay, so we've got our stories now. How do we organize it, and who's going to have the honor of writing the obituary and everything? And after just a bit of discussion, Roebuck ends up suggesting, hey, since we all had a hand in in this publication office, how about we all sort of cooperate in the spirit of camaraderie and write the obituary together and everything.
Hmm.
And it was a kind of a neat way to close out the story,
Yeah.
uh, because it was just kind of like um, their way of giving the publication the final hurrah, especially when you remember in the beginning of the movie, they sort of set up the premise that on um, Hauser's death, the journal publication would be closing after they put out their final issue.
Hmm.
So uh, it felt like sort of just um, seeing a much beloved publication sort of shuttering its doors. So for me, there was a little bit of sadness, um, because I've had a few publications uh, in paper magazines shut down just due to things like low budget and stuff like that. So it felt like this entertaining journal that I'd been reading for the entirety of the movie was just um, putting a stamp on the final issue, and just um, that would be the only issue you, to, I guess, send the legacy of the magazine off. So overall, it was a neat way to close the movie out, and overall, it just felt like just a really, really good read through something like a very engaging copy of the New Yorker or something.
Yeah.
So uh, I would probably still recommend this to anyone who may not um, who may not think that this may be in their interest, because it may be something uh, that might end up on on a person's radar in the future and everything. Because just for me, I went into this being completely blind to Wes Anderson's work. So for me, I would probably give this a high recommendation, mostly because, yeah, it was just a fun watch, even if it wasn't in my normal genre.
Okay. And your normal genre is just so everyone knows. What's your normal genre of films that you enjoy?
Um, Action, sci-fi, and um, maybe psychological
Okay.
thrillers.
You gravitate a lot towards Asian cinema, though, don't you?
Yeah, Asian cinema is definitely where most of my taste is, but
Okay.
I still enjoy some of the stuff done by the Western side of the world.
Yeah. Okay. Dirty Americans. Yeah. um, my final thoughts in the film, basically, as someone who's been a fan of Wes Anderson since Rushmore in 1990, was it 7? Oh my God. Um, it's a very good film. I would say it's a great film. Does it reach the heights of his best films? No. It kind of like we mentioned in the second part, it kind of falls apart. But I'm not gonna dock it too much, but because of that, because that scene's quick, and it gets through at a brisk pace, and you forget about it by the time the third part rolls. So I really enjoy the film. It's got the usual panache that Anderson has. It's fun. It's funny in certain spots. And it really has that distinct, like you mentioned, that distinct feel that you're reading or you're watching a reading of a New Yorker magazine to a certain extent. So I definitely enjoyed it. And I would definitely, if you're a Wes Anderson film fan, I would recommend it. If you're not, I don't know. I'd say give it a shot, but it's definitely the way that they call the main thing they call Anderson is twee, and I really hate calling him twee because everyone calls him twee, but it's an apt description. So if you don't mind kind of corny but really beautiful looking set design and colors, I would say give it a shot. But otherwise, if you're a fan or a film fan in general of Wes Anderson, I'd recommend it. It's a great film. Now, before we get to what our next film is, Zero, I have a question for you.
Okay.
For those of you who don't listen to our games podcast, called Game Watch, or Zero and Wiz's Game Watch, every episode I have a question for Zero for him to answer, mainly because Zero hasn't come up with a question for me, and he answers it, because I like to torture him. Zero, about a week ago, I gave you a link to a trailer. Do you remember what the trailer was for?
Oh goodness, it's it's been a while.
Okay, the trailer's for Weird Al Yankovic's new movie called Weird, the Al Yankovic story.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, did you watch the trailer? It was a minute long.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, what did you think of the trailer? And what did you think? And would this be a movie you would give a chance to watch?
The trailer is definitely interesting. As far as if I would watch it, more than likely I would because I do quite like Weird Al Yankovic, especially just because some of his songs have been just absolutely hilarious, especially just being interesting. I guess you could say interesting satires on society and the world at large.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely watch it whenever this gets available to like streaming services and things like that.
I first watched it, and I was kind of shocked that Daniel Radcliffe did not sound like Weird Al at all, and I mean at all. I was like, I watched it twice, and I was like, he's not even trying, is he? And for the minute, I was like, oh, this is a cash-in. Oh, no. But then I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute. This is kind of exactly what Weird Al would want. Because it's probably... My hope is that this is a movie that lampoons biopics, like, say, Walk Hard, and makes fun of the genre while talking about Weird Al's life when he was popular. So if that's the case, I'm kind of in on it, because I'm like, if that's the case, they're just gonna lampoon and not take it seriously, make fun of things, and go crazy with it. Then I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm there. But my first thought was, ooh, this looks like trash. But then when I thought, I was like, well, wait a minute, this might work. So
Yeah, I definitely sort of had the vibe of, okay, this has the feel of it being called in, but I think this is sort of like the satirical feel that Weird Al's going for.
yeah,
So yeah, I think this is going to work out, even if Daniel Radcliffe's performance definitely seems like it's phoned in.
he still has a British accent. That's the thing that was like, wait a minute, he doesn't sound British. When is this? So okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'm definitely gonna watch it. All right, Zero, it is your turn to tell us what we're watching for the next episode. Now, if you out there are listening and you want to recommend something, hit a comment on our video and comment on what you think we should listen to. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, to find out if you're going to get more of our videos. But anyway, yeah, if you have a recommendation of what you think we should watch, let us know. We do reserve the right to say no, by the way. But yeah. Go ahead, Zero. What are we watching now?
So my next recommendation is a Wong Kar-wai film. One of his most recent works from 2013 called The Grandmaster.
Okay.
And it's a biopic on Bruce Lee's teacher Ip Man. So if you kind of know this, the legend and mythology of Ip Man, just unfortunately, there's some accounts that are highly exaggerated, and then there's some accounts that no one can really verify, and unfortunately, that's just kind of the culture and mythology around surrounding Ip Man. So, and this biopic is definitely hyper stylized. So, and it sort of takes creative liberty with blending myth and truth together. So definitely be sort of prepared for for some things that you're probably going to see in the movie. And just like, yeah, no way. There's no way this actually happened.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you want to watch it with us, it looks like the Grandmaster. Could you get this on YouTube, or is it just on Amazon?
It's on several storefronts.
Okay.
The HD copy is going for about eight $8 online to buy it outright, and then it's about $4 online to rent it on
Okay.
video platforms such as Amazon Prime Video and the Google Play movie and TV store.
Okay. So if you want to watch with us and comment on the video when the review comes out, just go ahead and join us. So on that note, we are going to end this episode. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for the next episode. We're going to talk about Wong Kar-wai's The Grand Master. I am the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we'll talk to you next time.